Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our second webinar relating to energy. As you will have heard in the media late last week, our President Cyril Ramaphosa has now declared a state of disaster for the country's energy crisis, and that was with immediate effect. In his address, he referred to how this is affecting the country's economy, and as SPAR, we are very aware of how this is affecting our retailers, and we are working on a number of plans to assist with this. By now, you will have seen the answers from the first webinar that we held. The Q&A answers come through to either your WhatsApp groups or it's in your inbox. If you haven't, please get hold of your development teams. Your senior development managers do have all of those. Thank you to the senior development managers for making sure that that gets out to retail. Again, today we'll have a question and answer. Please post all of your questions in the chat. We will get to as many of them as possible during the course of the Q&A. Those that we don't get to, we will once again send out the answers at some stage. Today's webinar takes a look at some simple, practical energy saving solutions that can be implemented and have proven to be very effective in cost saving in terms of managing behavior of staff. We'll also be looking then at solar and battery installation systems and a couple of lessons with that with our guests. I'd like to welcome our guests today, Sean and Bram. Thank you for joining us today, gentlemen. We really appreciate it. Okay, so to jump straight in, I'd like to introduce Sean. Sean is the CEO of LED Lighting SA, as well as the director and co-founder of Lumalytic. Some people may recognize Sean from his latest exploits as he appeared on MasterChef SA in the 2022 season. And was the winner of MasterChef last season. So he's also exploring some other interesting endeavors at the moment, Sean.
Not just electricity savings.
Not just electricity savings, a little bit of gas thrown in there too, and some good
Exactly.
good times. That's awesome. So with his colleagues at LLSA and Lumalytic, Sean has built a very dynamic and truly South African business. A lighting manufacturer and supplier serving the South African retail market in particular over the past 15 years. With a record year last year, LED Lighting has supplied over 600 retail stores in South Africa with full lighting solutions. LLSA and Lumalytic's young, energetic and dynamic team have continued to innovate in this market of energy, finding practical energy management tools that are specifically tailored to the South African market. Sean, thanks. Over to you. Take us to your presentation. Thanks very much.
Thanks. Hello to everyone on the webinar. Welcome to a presentation by LED Lighting SA and Lumalytic. Thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to giving you guys some insight into my world. So, started my career as an industrial engineer. So, at the heart of an industrial engineer is that we're looking for energy savings in mostly manufacturing, but led me to actually end up being the CEO of LED Lighting SA. And it's almost at a fortuitous time, and that's obviously in a country where we're heavily pressed for energy savings. I ended up in a lighting company, one of the low-hanging fruits that you can actually get right in the retail store. And it's interesting because the journey of the company, it's had a long road, but recently we've really grown actually since COVID. So early COVID days was a brutal period, but coming out of COVID, with the pressure on electricity savings, we ended up actually getting up to 136 staff at the moment. And Lumalytic was a secondary company after LED Lighting SA. That we developed based on the factors that we realized that one element of obviously saving energy or cost cutting within a retail store or in a work environment is lighting. But the next is the behavioral change, and the next is the platforms that you need to actually enable the retail store. So Lumalytic actually started as quite an interesting place. We wanted to build the store of the future, and we had big visions of almost a 2020 or 2030 store in 2022, 2021, and a lot set us back, in honesty. We started to realize that there's some real problems that we face in the retail world, and we can't just jump to the fancy apps. We can't just jump to the entertainment within the store. We can't just jump to the store of the future where people can buy off their phone while they're in a grocery store, or find them as a location within the store and start doing targeted media. There was a lot more to it. What we realized is that we had to go back to the basics. So we started in, the actual company started in 2019, focused on, as I said, very far ahead of potentially where the South African retailer was or ready to take on. And so we started actually developing the platform of going, okay, well, what is the foundational blocks of a store of the future? And we realized that in South Africa, the foundational blocks of store of the future has actually got to do with starting to control the store from the basic elements, be it electricity, be it fridge management, audio, video, and all the various services that the retailer and the customer that is experiencing in the store. And so we went forward to go back, if that is something that I could say we actually ended up doing. And so we went backwards in 2020 to start again, and we said, okay, well, what is the real world problems the retailer is actually facing? And we said we're going to go and chase after an environmental control of the store in order to enable it to be energy efficient, well run, easy to find out what's going on in the store, and self-managed. So those were the elements that we decided we would tackle. It was quite an audacious goal, but fortunately we've got great backed partners, and so we went into the process with many coders, and we actually started building the platform one by one as we started understanding the needs of the retailer. And to date, we've now got quite a few stores live. We've got in Cavendish, we've got the We Are Egg store, as well as the We Are Egg store up in Rosebank. We've just started going live with trial stores with Nando's. And we've got some other stores as well that we're doing trials in energy management solutions. And it's been incredible to see, as we've gone through these core foundational trials on how to manage the retailer's environment for an energy efficient store, as well as take them on a journey to become the IoT store of the future, there's some problems that often are unknown. And I'll quickly give you an example of one of the most interesting energy problems that we found. And so while we had our head in the space of going to the store of the future, and as I said, finding the customer via the app and all these visions of the store of the future, we suddenly found that the real world problems were things like in a fridge. And in one of the stores that we went into, there was a 3-tier fridge. The first door being the fridge, the second door being a cold room for longer term storage, and the third being a freezer. And we couldn't understand, based on the logs that we were doing, what was going on with energy management. It was going through the roof in terms of that it wasn't linked to revenue. We were noticing that the revenue spike was obviously created through the day as customers started filtering into the store. And we couldn't see a linear graph between energy being used in the store and revenue. And so we started realizing that basically there was obviously a dislink between the two, and it was most likely a behavioral issue of those utilizing the environment of the retail store at the back. So we started putting on door sensors onto the fridge's doors and as well as the freezer doors. We started putting loggers of temperature into all three of the areas, and we started putting on energy management solutions, figuring out what was actually happening on the motors. And the most interesting thing that we found is, this is the real world problems that our South African retailers face, is that what seemed logical to the user was not logical to the owner or the shareholder of the actual store. The guys were using milk crates and things to block the doors. So the freezer was spilling over cold air into the cold rooms. They were at times of peak, they were starting to also wedge the door open. And for them, it was logical. So we can't potentially blame the user. The potential education, but between energy management and profit loss and actual utilization of that cold room, was probably a distance between knowledge and education and understanding. And what we realized is that as they were leading up to peak or getting ready with the kitchens or getting ready to start obviously preparing food, they were wedging these doors all open. So you can imagine what would happen. Obviously, the first thing is the motor that should now be on brand new VSD motor, so top of the range, supposed to be energy efficient, was running full tilt from morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, all the way to 6 o'clock in the evening. So in other words, the fancy energy managed solution of a really fancy motor on this fridge was totally being negated by the user interaction with this fridge. I'll show you some stats later. Just by awareness, just by dashboards, and giving the power back to the person who's using those fridges, that they actually understand that their behavior has an influence over the cost center of that business, has changed drastically. And that's just step one. That's just the first start of obviously the energy management solution is awareness. A lot of the time the staff don't even realize that we have a problem in the first place. And as I said, those are some of the real world problems that we face that we need to solve first before we can go on to store of the future, because those are the things that we face. And if there's no profits, we can't go on to the store of the future, and we can't empower that journey with the customer. So that's just a quick introduction for me in terms of what we do, but I'm going to go through the holistic principle that Lumiledic was set up to do. And one of the things that we've set up is, let's call it a relational BMS system. And it's got a relationship between the users, the end customer, as well as the owner of the store. And what we realize is that there's multiple building management solutions out there. And over all the years of doing lighting and having a factory and using building management solutions on the lighting side, what we realized is that 9 times out of 10, they are so complex, they are installed, and within 6 months, they're not utilized. And that really baffled us as we were trying to tackle the store of the future. And so we started realizing that we needed to simplify it. We needed to bring it down to the level that a user that is on the actual platform does not have complex controls. They have basic automated cues. For example, if the lighting is to be on from 8 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock in the evening, and then 6 o'clock in the evening we start merchandising the store, we need to take the interaction of the person needing to trigger that scene to actually automation schedules. But the problem with these huge automation schedules and the BMS systems that we face of today is that they're hugely complex. Something goes wrong, you need to bring in the engineers. Half of the time they don't even sit in South Africa. And so the relevance to the South African market or retailer was largely negated. And so that was always our vision, was how do we build a platform that is simple, intuitive, the South African user can actually manage it and understand it. If something goes wrong on the platform, how do they then change the schedule, or how do they actually see what has gone wrong? And so we've been building now for 4 years, and we've now started going live on a full, as I said, full store control, but on a basic level. And I really need to stress that. You can go very complex, but if we go very complex and it's not utilized or it falls over, those energy savings are going to be lost anyway. So some of the areas that you'll see on the screen at the moment are to do with all the different platforms. But I'm going to hone in on a few of them, because otherwise we're going to be here for 2 days as I go through the complexity of what you can actually manage in the store. But I want to go down to a few areas that are going to be relevant to the SPAR owner. And one of the things that we've been doing successfully for many years has been digital signage, managed Wi-Fi, and API development, which has got to do with the app development of unique apps and then integrated into the system. Now, as I said, those things are relatively basic and they're part of the platform, but what I want to hone in on is lighting controls, audio controls, power metering, temperature control, and utility management. And those areas are, let's call it the pressure point right now. Those are the pressure points on a retailer. And I think, we're facing a situation where, how do we keep our digital sign on when we don't even have power? How do we keep our Wi-Fi on when we've got on and off scheduling of load shedding? Those are the real world problems that we're facing, and so we need to tackle those things first. And so, as I said, we need to go into basic solutions, and I think we sometimes overcomplicate them. So let's start with lighting controls. So as I said, one of the big things obviously as my partner business, LED Lighting SA, is it's a relatively low-hanging fruit. It's a quick implementation. It's relatively uncomplicated to do lighting change-out, but that's just step one. Step one is that you can become energy efficient in your lighting, but step two is actually managing it properly and effectively. And on the lighting controls, we've developed not dimming, not fancy protocols. All it is 3 relays, which is basically a large switch that turns on and off. And there's 3 circuits in your store. And we aim to basically have the lighting either 100% on, 50% of the lighting on, or only 10% for emergency on. And with that, we set up an automated schedule, and it's got to do with your opening times. And it takes the user management out of actually having to go and trigger that scene. Because what we found is we've got a retailer at the moment we're working with hundreds of stores, and they've got the fancy control system, but it requires a user to interact with the system in order to get to the savings. So what we've done is we've basically automated that it's basically scheduling the lighting changes. So you're going to get that saving, and only should there be a problem. For example, we're doing merchandising and you're wanting to do some changes and you want all the lights on, you would have to go and override the lighting to all on, and then the next morning it's going to reset back to its automated schedule. Because I think, as we know, if we allow that obviously constant interaction, it's going to change. There's a lot of pressure on the store managers, and so they're probably going to forget what ends up being hurting the pocket. The other thing is obviously reducing the load with lighting controls. If we're putting inverters on, if we're using generators, what we can do is before the generator kicks in, we can change the schedule to a lighter load in terms of bring down your lighting, for example, to 50% of the lights on. And while it might not be optimal retail conditions for lighting, if you are obviously functioning now on a diesel generator, we can reduce that load. And if you are planning on going on inverter or a generator, the first thing we can do is actually, you can size the generator down, which comes at a huge saving. One of the things I'm busy doing actually at the moment is installing a generator at my office. And one of the things I saw is just the difference in the actual amount of diesel they're consuming, obviously depending on the size of it. So that ongoing expected cost going forward can be reduced. Some of the less, let's call it relevant right now for today, is the audio controls, but it's all automated. But as I said, the most important one is power metering that we're actually doing now. And I'm going to go into some of the things that it looks like. So this is a dashboard, is where the store manager can actually control it. They can see what's going on in terms of the actual utilities. And one of the most amazing things we saw, you'll see there in the dashboard on the left-hand side there, was gas. This was one of the biggest shocks, was how the operator is using gas, and without actually monitoring it, and only seeing gas monitoring on the whole building itself, and not knowing the detail of which burners are using what, we found gas is an instant. For example, if there's 10 burners, when the person arrives, all 10 are going on. And that is burning right throughout the day, and we're finding that there was no link to revenue. And that was one of the quickest low-hanging fruits we actually found, was gas utilization has come down drastically, with just the ability for the staff to understand when they're watching the dashboard that it goes red, to show them that they are using gas when it's not linked to revenue lines. So the dashboard has got to do with you as a retailer being able to control schedules, put audio changes, turn on your Wi-Fi for free Wi-Fi for your shopper experiences, but also being able to monitor what's going on. Are your fridge doors being left open? Are they being closed? Or are they actually, is the VSD of the motors just running all the time? So there's a lot we can do, but as I said, we can start off with basics and start going further as we go along. On the right-hand side, you can actually see there is where you would basically just, with a drop-down, you would schedule the lighting from 6 to 10 o'clock for one scene. From 10 o'clock onwards, you can change the scene, and so you're able to monitor that live. One of the other things that we have is, it's amazing, is just to see the real-time telemetry. So what you're seeing on the screen here is walk-in fridges and freezers. So the door open is at the top with a square, and the graph is the power as the motor is coming on. And as I said, it's amazing to see how, just from awareness of fridges, we'll go into some stats now, where fridges have been sometimes left open for up to 8 hours, and then you get the food wastage from the freezers spilling over and cooling down the lettuce down to -degree temperatures. There's a whole bunch of knock-on effects that you have if you don't have this sort of real-time data. Over here is where it gets really interesting. So the notification center is all about the awareness platform that you've got in order to figure out what's going on. So what we do is we normally scale it according to who should see what. So for example, what we don't want is every single time the door opens, we don't want an SMS to go out, or we don't want a notification to hit the platform. But what we do want is when it's been left open for X amount of time, so we can decide what is a reasonable time. The freezer might be left open for 7-8 minutes. We're finding is a reasonable time for the person to go in, get their stock and leave. But after 8 minutes, what we can do is we can send it to the first line store manager. So whoever's on that schedule for that day, they get notified that the store's door and the freezer has been left open. The second part is obviously it's going to hit the dashboard. So the dashboard is available to the store manager as well as even maybe that area manager. And it starts to alert them that there's a problem or it's gone red. So it's from green status to red status. So something needs to be done. Where it could even get more interesting is that we've obviously got hierarchies, is that we can, after 24 hours of no behavioral change, we can start alerting the actual owner of the store, which I'm sure from that point is where behavioral change will happen very quickly, we've noticed. Because obviously when it starts to hit the bottom line, we start to obviously make a lot quicker changes. So one of the biggest things with energy saving has actually got to do with mostly, as I said, awareness. So some of the more other screens that you can see of the energy monitoring as you go along. So some of the things that we can measure, and first step is measurements, second part is control. So the first thing that we get is obviously we start doing a telemetry line of electricity, gas, water, air cons, ovens. And this is some of all the areas that we have as low-hanging fruits. And what we find is that what's very interesting is without even automating, in other words, taking control of the device to turn it on and off, the first steps of just having that data and that awareness, we've seen drastic reductions. And I would suggest it's all done in various patterns. In other words, you don't go full hog. You start off with just actually measuring, finding out and defining what is going on in that store. Once you've defined what you've got on in that store, you start targeting the low-hanging fruits. Normally it's gas, electricity on freezers, air cons, things like that, and obviously is where you want to tackle first. So from that, we can start to put in controls, whether it be visual controls or actually hard controls in terms of saying, okay, well, if the oven is on after 8 o'clock at night, turn it off because there's no one there. There's a risk of obviously a fire or even obviously wasting electricity. Again, gas, if the store is not open and there's no person should be cooking after 8 o'clock at night, turn the gas valve off. So those are the second steps you can start going to, but the first step is actually getting that real-world data, understanding what is going wrong. This is just a view of what the dashboard can look like. So we can obviously scale it up differently depending on the retailer's needs, depending on what's the most important and what we're actually measuring. But this is the dashboard that would be seen by the employees. In other words, in an area, for example, in a bakery or a food prep area, we would display this, giving the power back to the person who's actually working in that area to understand what has not occurred correctly in that area. So for example, if everything is green, but the one is the gas, that person working in that area knows that gas is a problem. They are obviously overutilizing gas. And overutilizing gas can come down to obviously that the system picks up that you've gone and turned all 5 burners on at full tilt. So in other words, the 100% threshold of that gas has been used at X amount of hours. It's out of normal calibration, and so alert the person or get them to reduce until it goes yellow, until it goes green. So this is the sort of awareness that you can create. One of the other leaderboards that we've also put on is quite an interesting one, is we're busy working with a customer at the moment, is understanding across the various stores is actually a leaderboard across each of those stores as to how they're doing with energy management across the platforms. With that can be linked obviously to HR systems that have got profit incentives, bonuses, and targets that can be created for that store specifically. And if you've got obviously 4 or 5 stores in your group and you're actually wanting to target or find out which one is the least energy efficient, you've got a leaderboard that can basically help the staff and managers work out and target what they should be. This is the in-store managerial control, so it looks a little bit different. This is where you're able to schedule the music, change the Wi-Fi, turn the lights on and off, and we're busy actually even implementing lighting control into the refrigerators. So basically, instead of having the hard switch, which is often left on, is that in the refrigeration cabinet, the lighting gets turned off at the right times, as well as the store lighting. So everything is automated on the lighting side. And you can go and do that for all the other different various schedules. But those are some of the easy ones to do, and that manager can log into the dashboard, see what's going on in that store, and get a real world picture immediately of what alarms are going off, what is actually going on within those different cabinets of refrigeration, HVAC, cold rooms, hot ovens, even chip fat fryers, everything that basically has a draw current or a flow of gas or in electricity, we're able to measure it, and then obviously secondary, we can start to take control of it. So this is just some of the stats that came out of a month-long study that was done on the first store, actually. So there's been quite a few stores after this, but this was the first one. And the study was done just on refrigeration, just to give you what awareness does. I said, now take out the ability to control it. Just focus on the awareness factor of what can happen in a store. The first one is that on the 23rd of September, the first initial studies that we did for the first week, the store's fridge was opened 48 times on average per day. The freeze was opened 12 times. And you can imagine that base load difference in terms of obviously what's going on. A month later, the average dropped from 48 times on the fridge down to 29 times that door was opened. And the reason is that's purely awareness. The dashboard is sitting there. The staff are starting to be aware of the fact is that it is a problem if it's left open. And so they're conscious now of walking in, putting a milk crate to stop the door from closing, or even just standing collecting food with potentially the door wide open the whole time. So they're thinking a lot more about what was going on. You can see the baseline there, which was the big shocker, was the fridge time that it was open in the first week was 8.7 hours on average, dropped down to 4 hours. So it's still open because they need to do their job. They've obviously got a reason to be there. But the fact is you can see the difference in just awareness scales as how much energy changed there. This is some of the times. The number of doors, left-hand side was when it started the study. Next was a month later, the same week average, what you can see in terms of number of times that door and the freezer opened. You can see the drastic reduction there. This is the electricity. So this is the kick on, obviously, the outcome, obviously, on that. So the amazing thing was, what we started to realize is that there were some anomalies that we couldn't even understand ourselves. So the first one was, we obviously could understand the door open and close, but what we couldn't understand was, when looking at the store level, was energy was a huge spike in energy being used during the night. And after really trying to dig around, and we eventually actually went to the store at this time, because every single time, what we realized is that the oven had a self-clean function that was coming on in the middle of the night and sparking the power. So not that that was the problem. The fact is that no one could actually even figure out what was actually drawing so much current at that time of the night. Since then, we've changed the cleaning schedule to basically be a lower temperature cleaning cycle. And I think that was costing something like 40 Rand a night just to do the cleaning cycle in one oven. That's amazing how just those little things can make you aware of, and then the changes. This was the lighting control. So we had a 37% decrease just in the electricity consumption of the lighting. You can see the original lighting was basically left on all the time, which is very interesting because we've had so many retailers tell us it's definitely going off. And when we do the real world studies, we always seem to find that there's always an anomaly. Even if it's 2 or 3 nights a week, the lighting is getting left on. It's just, the store manager is either forgetting, they're tired, they're leaving the store, all the lights are staying on. And so what we found is that even with that variable, there was still a huge amount of energy saving that just on automating it from having a trading time lighting schedule to a merchandising lighting schedule to an off cycle that is just ready for emergency or cameras, enough just basically for CCTV. So it was a huge interesting fact that we found. And just over 3,300 Rand was just found in electricity savings in a very small store, about 600 and something square meters. The electricity was already in there as 3,300 Rand was saved. So what are you looking at in terms of, coming up to the end of my presentation, what are you looking at in terms of return on investment and how long it will take you? On a small store, this is a case study that we did, we found that there was just over 10,000 Rand per month on savings to be found, just on the awareness factor. As I said, the lighting was automated, but the rest was all awareness. We're still implementing all the actual control changes in that store. So on there, the monthly cost on the baseline is 3,500 Rand. The installation to do all the energy monitoring and dashboards was 44,000. And at the moment, we're seeing savings of 7,300 Rand a month. So at the moment, we've got 6 months to pay back. And if you think about it, on those low-hanging fruits, just on an awareness, it is very quick. And we can start off small, we can start to scale it up. But the main thing is if you start somewhere, it could just be on lighting, it could just be on awareness, it could be just on a few basics. And then as time goes on, we can start to implement more and more and more that you have controls over the store in terms of the basics and the low-hanging fruit, and then you can get more and more complex. This is just some of the interesting facts as well. On a small store, for example, in 1 month, 112 trees on CO2 was saved. Yeah, you can see some of the calculations there in terms of in the used and then the saved, how much we actually saved that month. So in conclusion, the main thing is that we're wanting to do is create the store of the future, but the store of the future in relevance to the South African need, an uncomplicated version of building management solutions that are relevant to us as retailers in South Africa with real-world problems that we face. Avoiding all the complexities that you can get into and often getting bogged down with things that are unnecessary is one of our visions. The second thing is obviously the environmental and sustainability awareness that we're obviously going to need to focus on and implement as well. And the other thing is improving forecasting on that store, understanding the energy management, understanding the actual baseline of the business, having it in real live telemetry versus actual data that you think is a problem. You may be solving a problem that's not even there, or it might not be the biggest problem within your store. So that's in conclusion for me. Look forward to working with you guys. Look forward to hopefully starting the journey with you guys. It's not just a flip of a switch. It is a start that you need to get going on. It's something that you can get going on, something very simple. And then the journey is probably a good few years before you become totally energy efficient. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sean. Some great information there. And once again, the message is, as we saw with our last webinar, the message is you have to measure it. You've got to measure it first before we can make any changes. As Sean said, you can be making changes to things that don't really need changes. You could be missing things that really do need changes. So again, get involved, speak to these guys, speak to the energy management consultants, get them involved in your businesses, and you can make a real difference. I mean, there's some, just through behavior, as Sean said, there's some great savings to be made, and every little bit at the moment counts. The more we can save, the easier this is going to be to deal with as a national crisis. The more we can save, the better off we're all going to be. Thank you very much, Sean. Our next guest today is Bram Snyman. He's the head of business development for Empower. Empower is a company that services a wide variety of different clients, both in the commercial and the industrial sectors. Their clients include manufacturers, retailers, data centers, as well as shopping centers. So a wealth of experience with Empower. Bram, he plays an advisory role for Empower to their clients, and that's from start to finish, from the consulting right through to the commissioning of systems. They look at facilities that have a high heating or cooling requirements, high energy or electricity demand, as well as a need for consistent supply. So Bram, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm sure you've got some great information to share with us, and over to you. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Adrian, and also thank you, Sean. I don't know how much this was by design, but Sean's company at Lumelytic and Empower's value offering complement each other very, very well. I don't know how much it was by design or by chance, but the two presentations, I think, complement each other very well. the efficiency side of managing your energy is as important as it is the supply side. So Sean did a great job of talking about, behavioral change, energy efficiency, which is on the behavioral side and also the demand side of energy. But Empower and my presentation will focus more on the supply side of energy, where you're getting it from. At the moment, most retailers are getting it either from Eskom or municipalities, and then going over or doing the what's called energy transition over to solar, battery, etc. That will then be the alternative supply sources. Empower has been involved in giving our value offering of solar and battery storage to multiple clients in the industrial and commercial space. We've been doing it for quite a while, and also integrating these solar systems with batteries and generators that are currently on site. We really get a hell of a lot of fulfillment from doing our jobs. One, because it's allowed our company to grow quite significantly over the past 5 years, but also the sense of satisfaction that we get from reducing the input costs for retailers and our clients in general. We see that as a way to reduce the input costs for businesses in South Africa, and in return, they can spread their profits, increase their profits, employ and help employ more people in South Africa and grow our company, or our country as a whole. But anyway, don't want to spend too much time on the semantics, but move over to maybe giving the retailers a little bit more advice regarding your individual transition over to solar and battery storage. But maybe before we move to what you should do in the future, I always like at looking back. And when we look back, it's actually very interesting and kind of mind-boggling how some people have not moved over to solar and renewable energy yet. In 2013, there was already a tax deduction or tax allowance made for individuals investing in solar systems, whereby you could accelerate, depreciate the solar system within the first year after commissioning, which helped incentivize individuals to purchase the system, own the system, and then recoup some of that money soon after commissioning. Solar energy has reached a levelized cost of energy that has been commercially viable since 2014, and that price has kept dropping ever since. Municipalities shortly after, about 2020, 2021, got involved as well with their own incentives, whereby they give you an attractive rebate or feed-in tariff, whereby any excess produced is pushed back to the municipality or to Eskom, and the individual owner of the solar system would then be remunerated for that. And it might sound silly, because some people might think, well, we just put up a really big solar system and push it back into the grid. But practically, there are times when the sun is shining, but the operations on site aren't at the maximum load. So there's a little bit of excess. Instead of curtailing that energy, pushing it back into the grid really helps recuperate some upfront cash spent maybe on the system, and it reduces that payback period and also helps stabilize our grid. Unfortunately, our grid's stability or availability factor has kept decreasing since 2008, 2010, to such an extent that late last year in December we saw level 6 load shedding, and that really kind of jolted the whole market and individuals in the commercial, industrial space, as well as residential space, to really invest in solar. On the supply side, there's been a large increase in demand for the systems, but more specifically the battery systems, because many of the retailers, there was a lot of wastage, downtime, and that affects your bottom line. So moving forward, I'd like to just look at, if you are considering installing solar systems with battery integration, possibly integrating the solar system with the current generators on site, how should you go about it? What should you consider? I'm trying to keep it as practical as possible for you to get the ball rolling, and also to start gathering some of the information required to make the transition to renewable, reliable, and green energy a little bit smoother. So firstly, what you definitely need to consider as a retailer, Some retailers might be landlords themselves. So then the discussion becomes an internal discussion, management discussion about when, how, and how quickly would we like to implement solar, start saving, and recuperate our upfront investment. If you're not the landlord, then it becomes a conversation with your landlord as a tenant. Multiple real estate investment trusts, developers have already got a rollout plan how they're going to install solar, install batteries, backup energy for each of their sites. And you might be just next in line to receive that solar system. Other developers and real estate investment trusts might not have something like that in place, but are more than welcome for you as a tenant to install a solar system, especially if you've got a long-term lease agreement with the landlords. Then also the complexity comes in when you consider whether you're on an ESCOM or on a municipal electrical supply. Municipalities, some have been very proactive. The City of Cape Town last week, Gordon Neil Lewis really made a point of making it clear to the individuals who are on a City of Cape Town tariff that they would happily receive the electricity in return for a nice feed-in tariff. Other municipalities have the same thing going. Stellenbosch municipality has done a great job. Ekurhuleni recently rolled out and implemented their feed-in tariff, and multiple other municipalities are doing the same thing to incentivize everybody to help reduce the load on our national grid. But the point is that you need to start having that conversation with either your landlord or internally, or start engaging the municipality. Now, the nice thing that happens when you start engaging the municipality, and especially the really proactive ones, is they would happily send you back hourly load data. They obviously send you monthly bills, but when designing a solar system, we also need to know that hour by hour, how much electricity are you using, and we need to design a system that's tailored according to your needs, to not oversize the system, but also not to make it too small. The same counts for ESCOM. However, sometimes ESCOM might take slightly longer. Then moving from that discussion that you've had internally with ESCOM, with the municipality, you would have quite a lot of information to bring to an EPC or an engineering company that's got great reputation installing these systems. But before you do that, you might also want to consider, what do you see your business looking like in the next 5 to 10 years? This is important, especially when we consider where we would utilize space for solar panels simply. We would not like to install solar panels where you would, for example, in the future like to expand and grow your business. So having that foresight and thinking it through beforehand, before you approach an engineering company, always really does help. Then on the engineering side, there are multiple different offerings depending on what you require. Sometimes we can improve the utilization of a system merely by tilting the panels to come closer to their standard operating positions. Other times we can use a blend of tilted or flush mounted systems. Each of these have trade-offs. Some might be more affordable than others, but other times the more expensive options might give larger yields. Then there's also the option of replacing carports. Again, there are trade-offs. It might be less affordable, but the utility in carports are great. They give extra shading to your customers and employees, and also help produce renewable energy at the same time. So have an idea in mind of what the next 5 to 10 years looks like for you as a business. Let's call it a strategic roadmap for your company, and then approach the engineering company with that information as well, that which you have gathered from your municipality, landlord, or ESCOM. Then getting a little bit more into the nuts and bolts. Obviously, these solar panels have inverters which convert AC to, or DC to AC energy to push into your breakers and into the tie-in points at your facilities. But we also need a nice, well-ventilated, naturally ventilated space in the area, preferably. Now, at times, at those sites, there is more than enough space available, as you can see on that center picture that I've put on the presentation. But sometimes we need to make a plan to make sure that this equipment is in an area that's well ventilated, close to the tie-in point, to really reduce the amount of AC cables that we run to the tie-in point. But at times, again, there is no space available. If you just look at the fixed mounted structure there somewhere in the Karoo, there's containerized solutions as well, which we then ventilate to make sure that we can supply renewable energy, backup energy for our customers. Again, it's something to consider upfront and is very valuable when you approach a engineering company with some degree of a plan upfront. And then lastly, something that we've talked about extensively in the last 2 years as customers come to us as an engineering company is, the trade-off between integrating your generator versus installing a battery system. Now, if there is no generator on site, the upfront cost for a generator is quite a lot lower than that of a battery system. But the running operational costs is significantly higher. Recently, some retailers in South Africa indicated that they spend up to 60 million monthly for at their businesses. So the savings when you look at the operating costs are significant, and sometimes even it might be better to fork out the cash up front and then reduce your operational costs. Then there's also the option, if there's a generator on site, to integrate that generator with the solar system. The generator then acts as a reference load during load shedding, and the operational cost of that generator becomes reduced during sunlight hours. But again, there's the consideration that if you are running during load shedding during nighttime hours, then the solar system would not be able to support that generator because there's no sunshine at that time, clearly. So at the end of the day, you need to make all these considerations, and sometimes it's very helpful to have some idea in mind when you approach the engineering company. Then moving over to financing these systems, there are multiple offerings out there. Everybody is, joining hands. IPPs, which are independent power producers, and engineering companies like Empower, to fund these systems for you if you would not like to invest in the system yourself and rather invest your available capital in your business. Now, all of these have trade-offs. If you decide to purchase the system for yourself and take it on as an asset, benefit from the Section 12B tax deduction, then clearly you're going to reduce the cash that you have available to push into your business, but the savings might be less. If you'd like to opt for a outright or for a power purchase agreement, there's no upfront capital outlay. The IPP would fund that for you and sell the renewable energy to you at a fixed rate, at least for the first year, and at a fixed annual escalation rate, which is a lot better compared to what we've seen in the past, where Eskom increases their tariffs 1 year at 12.5%, the next year at 7.6%, the year after, and shortly to come 18.65%. So it allows you to do a bit more long-term planning if you opt for a PPA option. And then finally, the banks are more than happy to fund solar systems at the moment, sometimes at subprime rates. So talk to your bankers, they will more than be happy than to fund the system for you. And depending on your tariff and depending on your operating hours, that system might be cash flow positive in the first 2 years. But again, it's very dependent on your particular scenario and your strategic outlook for your business. And then finally, just to come to a conclusion, the point that I really want to drive home is that each individual solar system and each individual business will be unique. And it is very likely that you would need a bespoke solar system with or without generator integration and with or without battery integration. Depending on how you see your business moving forward, you might want to opt for an outright purchase of the solar system, or retain your capital and opt for a power purchase agreement. These are all things that you need to consider moving forward, and once you have that information, maybe approach an engineering company who would happily design a system for you and get the project rolling. Right, that's it from me, guys. Thank you very much. I look forward to the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Bram. So the encouraging thing is that there are solutions out there. A lot of the solutions, as Bram points out, are that we're not talking about cheap systems. It is expensive technology, and as Bram says, there are options when it comes to financing those options or going through other service providers and that. The encouraging part, there are solutions. Now, so thank you very much for that. I have a question. So Sean, your side of the business is more managing the electricity, monitoring and all that kind of stuff. Companies like yourselves, are you happy to supply data to companies like Empower to assist retailers in building the correct solutions?
I think one of the things is that a lot of the systems that are worldwide are very protective of their data, they're very protective of their ecosystem. And that was one of the reasons why we actually started Lumalytic, was that we realized that we needed a South African solution to the real world problems that we had that would integrate with other companies. And so one of the first things we actually set up was, we said we're going to not be the Apple of the world, we're going to be the Android of the world that allows integration with those around us. And actually the stats that I was showing you guys earlier was from a store that we didn't take control over and say you have to use all our devices. We actually had, there's about 4 partner companies sitting in there. Some that were already doing gas monitoring, some that were already doing electricity management, or some that were already doing lighting management. We brought it all together so that it became one cohesive package. And in all honesty, I think if we all win, our solution will go forward versus us protecting that little data field and being in control of it. So 100% yes.
Great, great. So Bram, you're quite comfortable to work with data as long as it's clean data and you understand what you're getting. I think that's the bottom line, is that the integrity of the data.
Yeah, look, what often happens, like I explained, you can get metering data from the municipality. But at retailers, for example, they don't want to run their whole system off a battery system because the cost of such a system is astronomical. But companies like Lumalytic might be monitoring, essential loads, which we need to put on a battery solution. And when we get that information, it is very helpful to design a bespoke battery solution for a retailer, which is tailored exactly to their needs.
Okay, great. Thanks. So that sort of brings us to our Q&A session. I do have some questions that we could ask you guys, and we have seen we've got a number of people dialing in. I have one question here that we had a comment come in that managing and metering is one thing, but how does it help bring down our costs? And as you point out, Bram, that metering is what helps you to design the system correctly. Just from your perspective, how else can just managing and monitoring your consumption help to bring down costs?
Well, I think it comes down to what's not monitored doesn't get maintained. The visuals that Lumalytic gives the customer and the retailer full sight of what's happening at the shopping center. So monitoring that reduces or gives them full sight what's happening on site, and they can take away the cartons that they put in front of the fridge to reduce the consumption. That's such a simple way of reducing your utilization of energy. But also from our perspective means that the value of the solar system increases exponentially, because none of that energy is wasted, and whatever is wasted we can hopefully push either into a battery to charge the battery, or we can, if the municipality allows that, push it back into the grid to get a feed-in tariff.
Okay. When it comes to IPPs, independent power producers, one of the questions I have with that is, when those systems, when there's a problem with the system, maintenance, all that kind of thing, do the RPPs manage that? Do they maintain the systems? How does that all work?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. They take full responsibility of that system. It essentially becomes their asset that they maintain, insure on your roof or the carports that they might have installed. So that is almost a risk-free solution, but it comes with a long-term agreement.
Okay. Sean, question to you, very similar. Your systems that get put into place, they are obviously RT, a lot of RT-based systems. When it comes to support and backing up these things, there's obviously, there's sensors everywhere that you would need. What kind of support do companies like yourselves offer on those systems?
So I think one of the keys is to have a company like us that has obviously got relevant experience in the market. And that's the half of the problem that I've also seen is like companies that have come in from overseas with great technology, but if they don't have the real world understanding of the problems that we actually face, like your Wi-Fi and your internet may be going down 6 or 7 times a day. Those are real world problems that you need to face and then have the mitigation steps. So for example, we do have monitoring team. Basically, we have call out teams and we have an electrical contractor that has actually got shares in our company that has a national footprint on purpose that we can't just supply, install and leave the retailer hanging there. Because as I said, those are some of the problems that you face on a day-to-day basis. So we do have fail-safes. So for example, we designed the system really for the South African need that if the power falls over, or even if the internet falls over, it goes back into the state that is still in control. So in other words, it's not going to just fall over and then the system falls over with our ever-changing environment that we're facing at the moment.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sean. So I have a question here. If I buy solar power from landlord, who provides me with penny power as well?
Penny power.
Yeah, that's the question. I would assume, maybe if we could just clarify that question a little bit more. Could we ask the person asking that question just to clarify a little bit more for us? I think it's so another question that has come up. A lot of our stores, our retailers, rent the spaces that they're in. Mm-hmm. The roof doesn't necessarily belong to them. Some of the questions that have come in would be, what happens if we can't do solar? Are batteries still a viable solution? Would that help out? Are there ways to utilize the power stored in batteries to lower energy costs, to mitigate the effect of retailing, maybe take some of the load off generators and charge batteries at different times?
My experience has been that landlords in general have been very happy to roll out these systems. So once you start the conversation, you can quickly get to the sense that the landlord is willing to install this themselves. And once the landlord owns that system, he's got the flexibility to charge you either a reduced rate, or if he's installing a big battery system, he clearly has to recuperate his upfront cost, right? So sometimes the extra energy reliability might come at a cost. But when you compare that to wastage and the loss of operating hours, it's sometimes absolutely worth it. So engaging your landlord is the first part to that question. Secondly, when you go for only a battery solution where you can charge the battery, essentially buy low, sell high, it really depends on what tariff you're on. If you're on City of Cape Town, for example, has got a flat tariff across the board. You can't buy low, sell high. You're just buying the same cost of energy and using it when the municipal grid fails you during load shedding. But when you're on a ESCOM load, or some municipalities have a time of use tariff where the energy is very affordable late at night, you can charge those batteries at a low rate and use it during either peak hours, or you can use it during load shedding. So that allows you to further reduce the costs, but use the grid while it is available. And in that is when you need to consider that, you need to weigh up what are you losing during load shedding? What's the cost of wastage to you? What is the cost of the diesel generators that you might be running? So it becomes it's a difficult question to answer outright, but again, it depends on your tariff, operating hours, and what you are losing during load shedding.
Okay, and I suppose that all comes back to being able to measure and monitor.
Absolutely.
And knowing your systems. Fantastic. Okay, so there's a little bit more clarity. Thank you, Alicia, for clarifying that. It's actually, if I buy solar power from the landlord, can I still use generator power? Can they still use the generator power? I suppose that depends on the system that's implemented and getting the proper systems built and engineered for your store. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, if they're looking at integrating the generator on site with a solar system, that is doable. You're not going to use the roof per se, but you can integrate that system with a solar system. Yes.
Okay. Okay. That pretty much seems to be the questions that we've had come in today. Thank you very much to our guests for joining us. I believe some good information, some good food for thought. As we've said before, questions, keep posting them. We will keep monitoring and we will answer all the questions that come through. If you would like to get in contact with any of our experts from today, if you go to the Retail Studio platform, to Retail Operations Development, you will find national suppliers and a tab for our energy solutions and management companies. If you click on the company's logos, it will take you directly to their websites. You can contact them from these websites. Also available on our Retail Studio platform under development is the SPAR Energy Efficiency Manual as well as Solar Simplified. Give those a read. That'll give you more insight. There are some really valuable checklists in the energy manual that can help you to assist in getting some of the behaviors in your store correct. That's about it. That's what we have time for today. Thank you very much to our guests. Thank you very much, Bram. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Sean.
Sure.
And then thank you to the team for assisting putting this together. And to everybody in the background, thank you so much. And then a very big thank you to those who have dialed in to this session today. We really appreciate your time, and we hope that you took something valuable out of today. Thank you very much. Bye.